You're listening to Media Savvy Moms with Melody and Marilyn, a podcast by Parents Aware, your go-to for information on how to talk to kids and teens about pornography and healthy sexuality.
Hello and welcome back to Media Savvy Moms. Today we will be asking some big questions. What if my spouse struggles with porn? And does this impact my children? And how can I protect them? And we have a wonderful guest on the show today. Her name is Rosie Makinney. She is author of Fight for Love. And she's going to help us find the tools to prepare to start tackling this issue, either in our home or our marriage. So Rosie is an author, speaker, and podcaster. 10 years ago, she entered this fight, not just the fight against porn, but porn's attack on her own marriage. She reaches out to other women who struggle with porn-invaded marriages, and she is building a recovery community in Central Coast of California. She is the founder of Fight for Love Ministries, and we are so happy to have you on the show today, Rosie.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I love your show. As a mama, I adore your show.
Thank you, Rosie. Aw, shucks, we're blushing. No, it's really wonderful to know that there are mamas out there listening. And it's so great to be working side by side with you, Rosie, because we were talking before the show about how there's just no way that we can all tackle all angles of this problem of pornography. Our families are under attack. Our marriages are under attack, our children, our spouses. And so Rosie is here talking to us as an expert in the faith-based community for wives of addicts. And I just have to say, we've been reading her book, Fight for Love, and it is this topic is so heavy and so dark and so overwhelming. And this book is so bright and hopeful and lovely. And I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for your work. And second, for doing it with so much hope and brightness and love. Fight for Love is such a great fit for what you do. So get us started, kick us off. Tell us a little bit about you, Rosie, and how you got into this fight and how Fight for Love Ministries came to be.
It came to be because I really felt there was something missing between people being in relationships where they just felt something was off. They maybe knew or suspected that pornography was a problem, and actually getting into recovery. There's a big gap there. And what normally happens is that wives try for years unsuccessfully to try and fix this problem on their own. Mm-hmm. They take in the messages from the world, which are, it's healthy, it's empowering, it's liberating, this is beneficial to your relationship, just get on board. And they try and compete with it. So we try that, and we try and improve ourselves and, go to the gym and be more adventurous, and we do all these things, and they don't work. Mm-hmm. And then we go to the church and we go, this is a problem, and I don't know what to do. And the message we get from the church is not the same. It's not that porn is good or beneficial, but there is a sort of assumption that it's kind of inevitable. This is every man's battle. This is just something that everybody struggles with, and you just need to find a way to live alongside it. This is about sin management rather than absolutely getting this out of your marriage. So that leads wives to not to either continue to try and compete with it, like if I fulfill all his desires, he will no longer need to do it, or they go the other way and they go, I'm just going to be so graceful, I'm going to be so forgiving, I'm just going to love him unconditionally, and somehow that's going to make him feel so loved that he doesn't need to do this anymore. And again, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So the problem is not that wives have not been wanting to tackle this issue. It's that they've just been fighting in the wrong way. So my whole mission is to just educate people what works and what doesn't work. And I've told you what doesn't work. So what does work is drawing that firm line in the sand and putting up boundaries as soon as you can. And it's just the same as you do with your children. You put those boundaries in. You wouldn't try and be more graceful with your children. You wouldn't try and say, well, let's just find something that's slightly less harmful. You wouldn't try and manage it. You go, absolutely, we're not having this in in our household because it's bad for this is no way healthy for our children. And the same applies to your spouse. The same damage that it's doing to your children's brains, it's doing to your husband's brain. So once you grasp that there's no way you can actually fix this or control this or cure this, the only thing you can do as a spouse is to put up those firm boundaries. It's rather liberating. It's almost, it is empowering because there is something you can do, but it's not that you're going to fix him. It's to get him to somebody that can fix him. That's your only job. But I don't think I've answered your question. Your question was
That's okay. We're going to get to this. We can backtrack. We can go back and answer the question because this is so beautiful. You're starting right at the hope. Yes. This is the message that you want to get out, and that is what Fight for Love Ministries is about. And the things that you're saying are so needed and really need to be heard by our audience and by wives, and they're the things that we miss. So I'm glad we're putting them right at the top.
Thank you, because your whole show is about helping our children achieve their potential. Let's get pornography out of the way so that it doesn't hijack their trajectory. Let's enable them to reach their potential. And the same applies with your marriage. This is not just having your same old marriage minus the pornography. This is about having marriage as it could be. This is about helping your spouse reach his potential. Because believe you me, if you've married a guy who got addicted to this as a kid, as a teen, early on, you don't even know who you're married to. There is so much more there to be uncovered, to be discovered. And now I have a husband that I didn't, when I married him and realized that this was a problem, he certainly wasn't the man I thought he was. But even now, he's not the man I thought he was. He's so much better.
Right. You move the cloud away and it's this shroud that's been there the whole time. And I think probably the same goes for our families, right? We want our families to be unencumbered by this thing and our families to reach this potential too, and to take this. I love in the introduction of your book how you talk about this snake slithering through our homes and how we're going to now patch up the holes and we're going to get the snake catcher and we're going to come and we're going to cast it out of our homes. And it goes right along with our Beware of the Rattlesnakes episode. We're just right on the same page here.
And that's great because it's not about, pretending that the snake's not there. The snake's there, just pretending that it's not there. Isn't going to make the problem going to go away. And that is our tendency. We don't want to look at the difficult areas. But in the case of pornography, we know the stats, it's out there.
Right. Absolutely. And that's where we live with Media Savvy Moms, right? We know now it's time to get it out, but how do we do that? And that's where you're going to help us to do. But let's backtrack a little because I do want to hear your backstory and I want to hear about you and how you got into this work.
Sure. So I am very lucky in a certain sense in that I have been on this journey twice. And I have, before I came to faith, and I was in a relationship with an unrepentant porn addict. And I tried everything to fix this in my own strength, and nothing worked. So that all fell apart. And then I met my husband. And when this became apparent that this was an issue for him, very early on in our marriage, like honeymoon early in our marriage. And it, because pornography does not just affect you inside the bedroom, it affects you outside the bedroom, and it affects, how they interact with you, and, they can be critical and resentful and all these other things. I had enough experience at that point to go, oh, I know these warning signs. Because he'd already admitted that he'd got a problem with pornography earlier on in his life. But I thought because he admitted it, this isn't going to be a problem. I've got one here who, yes, he's got a problem, but he's admitting it and he knows that it's a problem and he doesn't want it. So therefore it's not going to be a problem, because at that point I thought it was all about the attitude. Right. I thought, if you don't want it, then therefore it's not going to affect you, which now in hindsight seems a bit ridiculous. But, just because I know I'm alcoholic.
You're hopeful, right?
I was hopeful. I thought, yay, he admits it. So it was very clear early on that this was going to be a major issue. And I think it was sort of a post-traumatic stress disorder reaction. It was like, I cannot do this again. I I cannot go through years of trying to fix this and then it all fall apart. We're going to fix this now, or we're not going to do this. And I gave him an ultimatum. I said, I love you too much. I love our marriage too much to go down this path. So you can have me or you can have the pornography, but you can't have both. It's now your choice. Unfortunately, he was ready. He was done. He wanted to get help. And so we got into recovery. And then we just found that for me and for him, recovery was so transformational that we wanted to share it with other people. And we started running groups. And then we went out speaking, at churches and parents groups and things. And the thing that really struck us after years of talking to different groups is that it's when you talk to the women that actually things start moving. Because we tried talking to men's groups and not many people came forward. They'd come forward at the time, but then they'd go home and think about it. And, addict brain would take over and like, oh, I don't need to fix that. We tried talking to parents groups thinking, well, we'll talk about the children, but really we're talking to the marriages. Mm-hmm. Again, slight success, but it's so difficult. And then I said, why don't I just go and talk to women's groups? I talked to women's groups and there was a huge reaction. It's like women are desperate for this information. Just tell me how to fix it. Just give me the tools. And it's like, okay, this is what we need to do. And that's how the ministry grew. So my husband retrained as a certified sexual addictions therapist, and we've built up a community here on the Central Coast. And from that community, I was able to join with other wives who are now in porn-free marriages. And we have created this ministry where we podcast and we talk and we share the hope that it is possible, and also share all the things we had to learn the hard way so you guys don't have to. And it's beautiful. And now with the launch of the book, we've opened up an online support group and the women are flooding in. And it's so rewarding to see people come out of the shadows and taste hope for the first time. Mm-hmm. It's really, it's beautiful every time.
It's so beautiful to see something hopeful, because many times there's not a happy ending for this. And so many times women can't find the help they need, or they don't know that there's help at all, right? You were there, you've been through this twice.
Yeah.
And I remember in the book that you started to learn the brain science behind what's going on with addiction. And it was your second time through and you thought, why didn't I know this?
Absolutely.
Why didn't I know what's going through why isn't this public knowledge? How come I didn't know? And I love the realization that you came to, that I'm not crazy. He's not crazy. Society is crazy. This is crazy what we have to deal with and what we have to face. And it's the same with us, with our families and with our children. It's crazy what we have to deal with in our society, with sexting and with pornography and with all of these things, like you said, that we're expected to just live alongside and deal with and manage and cope, instead of understanding that it's possible to get it completely out of our lives.
You're right. It is so confusing, isn't it? It is so bewildering, the messages that we are bombarded with. I even heard a parenting podcast the other day where the host said, the problem with your children watching pornography is that they're just watching the wrong sites. What you need to do is lead them to healthy, ethical sites. And I was sitting there with my jaw open going, are you kidding me?
So they're watching the wrong porn, and you need to get them to the right kind of porn.
Yeah, where it's guaranteed to be consensual and they've got good working conditions. I mean, how... Help me.
Right. Did you hear our episode called Bad Advice About Pornography? Yes.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yes, this
fits
for
that one.
Everyone, this fits into perfectly the category. You don't believe it, but it's true. People give advice about, oh, what will you... Marilyn, her story was, she was in a parenting group where someone is asking, well, what can I do to help my son break away from his pornography addiction online? And they were recommending to give him Playboy instead, because then he'll look at the magazines instead of online. And we were going, okay, so we're going to help the porn addiction by giving him porn. So, we talk about this and you're thinking, oh, that doesn't really happen, but it does. It really happens.
It totally does.
So let's say this, instead of finding the right sources of pornography to fix the problem, we're going to recommend that you find the right sources of information to get you help and get out of these situations. And Rosie is a great source of information, and Media Savvy Moms is a great source of information for your families to get out of these problems and to get the real help and the real hope that you need. So we're going to take a little break on that note. And when we come back, we're going to get some great practical tools and tips from Rosie on helping your family and your marriage. We'll be right back.
When parents share with me their concern over a child struggling with pornography, I always recommend they check out Fortify. Fortify is an amazing recovery tool that can help your teen learn to develop their own plan towards success. It's easy to sign up, it's designed to engage, and it's free for teens. Best of all, Fortify is science-based and has a proven track record of helping thousands of individuals find happiness by regaining their freedom from pornography. Visit joinfortify.com/Media Savvy Moms to learn more.
And we're back, and we are talking with Rosie Makinney from Fight for Love Ministries and author of the book by the same name, Fight for Love, and podcast also. So we were talking in the beginning about your story, about Fight for Love Ministries, how it came about. In this second section, we promised some practical tips and hints about improving and protecting our families and marriages. Let's start off by talking about some of the myths that we believe as women about pornography addiction and dispel some of those myths.
I think the biggest one, or in fact, I know the biggest one, is that somehow this is my fault. Somehow I am responsible. Somehow I am not enough. And they did a study and they found out that 75% of spouses of porn addicts at some time believe that lie, that they are the one responsible for his usage. And the problem with that is that it gives you this false belief that somehow you can fix it.
Mm-hmm.
If you just try hard enough in the right way, you can fix it. And that is not true. Marital sex, pornography usage, they're not interchangeable. They do different jobs.
Right.
You know, in the brain, they have a different impact. So you cannot fix one with the other. And so that's the biggest myth that we believe. But then there's all the other ones like it's harmless, you know, not fully understanding what it's doing to your brain, or that it is possible to be okay with it. That somehow as women, if that actually it's our job to be okay with it.
Right. And even that some say it's healthy for our marriage, right?
Exactly.
It spices things up in the bedroom.
But this completely invalidates the traumatic impact of living with someone who is addicted to pornography, because wives are always affected. So when I hear people say, oh, what a wife doesn't know doesn't hurt her, it's completely false and very damaging advice. So if someone, you know, and unfortunately, you know, a lot of pastors believe that it's healthier for the marriage to keep the deceit going. Well, they don't say it in those terms, but actually that's what they're saying. They're saying, actually, the way to protect your marriage is to keep your wife in the dark about your porn use, because it's just going to hurt her. But that's missing the point. She's already being hurt. It's not the fact that it's not telling the truth that's going to hurt her. It's the fact that you're already betraying her and deceiving her about it that's hurting her. And what is so difficult about living with someone who is addicted to pornography is that you start to think you're going crazy, because your instincts are telling you one thing, because either you know there's something wrong in the bedroom, because porn addicts go one of two ways. They either become hypersexual, demanding more sex or more pornographic inspired sex, or they become sexually avoidant.
Right.
So the more porn that they watch, the more they need to be thinking about pornography to maintain their arousal. And wives don't understand that you can be a porn addict and be sexually avoidant.
Yes.
You know, that's so confusing, you know, to a wife, but that's the reality. And I think once you just understand that one thing, if you are in a situation where your husband is avoiding you sexually, it's so liberating because you realize it's not because of you.
Right.
It's no reflection on you. And
it's not because I'm not desirable. It's
no,
because he's got a problem and his brain is sick.
absolutely. And when you get into the support groups and you see the other women, you go, oh, you're so beautiful. You're so kind. You're so smart. You're so funny. What's wrong with your husbands? Like, they're crazy. And that, again, is so liberating because it's hard to say that about yourself. It's hard to look in the mirror and go, I'm worthy, I'm enough, I'm beautiful. But it's easy to see it with other people.
Sure. Well, we love that idea from your book, too, about having that sense of community and having that be part of the recovery process of being surrounded by other people and having that build up the hope. Along those lines of, because I'm listening to you talk about thinking that what she doesn't know doesn't hurt her, and that we really are influenced by this addiction, and that I love the analogy that you use about secondhand smoke, that makes sense in our heads, right? We have this thing in our home that is hurting us, even though we're not the ones using, right?
Yeah.
And it goes for our spouses and for our children too. If there's pornography in our home, we understand as parents that if our children are directly exposed to pornography, it's going to hurt them, right? We get that. We want to protect our kids. But we need to not fall into the trap of thinking, oh, it's just my spouse looking, or, oh, it's just me. I have an addiction. It's not hurting my kids. Not true. Not true.
Yeah. So, as you've quite rightly said, there are those obvious direct risks of accidental exposure and then all the ramifications of them falling into porn. And you talk about that a lot, what it actually does and the increased risks for this and that come from being exposed to pornography. But what is less known is those indirect impacts when it's in the atmosphere, when it's causing problems between mom and dad.
Mm-hmm.
Because pornography is the quiet killer of families, and it slowly and progressively destroys trust and intimacy between mothers and fathers. And, although it's natural to want to shield your kids from the truth when it involves compulsive porn use, experts say that it's actually worse for the child to be kept in the dark. Pretending that everything is fine and that there isn't a problem is actually going to backfire, because children sense that discord and it makes them feel alone and anxious, depressed and stressed. And then they might even isolate themselves because they believe they're responsible, become preoccupied, trying to work out what is going on, and focusing on anything else, schoolwork, hobbies, anything, becomes challenging. They've done studies where they prove that actually even affects their cognitive development. It affects their ability to think. It affects their academic performance, not including their social and emotional development. So not to scare you with, having this in the atmosphere is going to, wreck your children. You need to be aware, just like anything else, if there is marital disharmony going on, and the longer that porn is present in a relationship, they have proven the unhappier both spouses become. That's just fact. If it's in your marriage, it is progressively making it more problematic.
And we are here to talk about how to beat that, right? And what the opposite side of the coin is, because we're always talking about how to talk about pornography and healthy sexuality. And we have our episodes about smooch around your kids and show our children what a healthy relationship looks like, right? And so, but in order to do that, we have to get porn out of our marriages and porn out of our homes, right? Then we can have these healthy, beautiful relationships to model for our children, so that we can have all those good things like emotional health and happiness, and then their kids can thrive, right? So that's the goal of all of this. That's your goal. That's our goal. We're working together, and that's what we want for our kids.
And I would actually say that those parents who have fought this battle and got pornography out of their marriage have actually given their children an advantage. I know many families who, through this, through the recovery process, you have to tell your kids what's going on, at an age appropriate level. They need to understand what is the cause of the problem, and what is the problem that you're dealing with. And those families who have been forced to open up the channels of communication and actually talk to their children about pornography and what it will do, their children are absolute little warriors. They are incredible. And I know two families. I mean, one of them, their son is 18. He goes to school with the Porn Kills Love t-shirt on. You know, he is just like, don't you talk to your mum about pornography? You know, like, what's the problem? And then I have another family where this was heartbreaking initially, because when they started to tell their 10-year-old son about what was going on, he then came forward and told his struggle. Mm-hmm. It allowed him to come forward and say, do you know what, Mum, I'm struggling with this. And this boy just like wept. He was desperate to let it all out and share what had been going on for him. And although it was just, I mean, it just gutted the mother, that not only am I dealing with this with my marriage, I'm dealing with this with my son. Mm-hmm. That family is so strong now. And that little boy, who is now, I don't know, 16, but he stood up at 12 and gave his testimony in front of a whole group of people and children and said, you know, I accidentally fell into this when I was 6.
Yeah.
And I've just had access to this, and this was my story, and it's not my story anymore, and you don't have to do this, and we have to come forward, and we have to start standing up and telling each other about what we're struggling with. And that family is amazing. That family is, they have the sort of conversations around their dinner table that you can only sort of dream of. You know, like, would that really happen? You hear all the advice and you think, does that really happen? I know for a fact that it happens. And, you know, whenever that kid gets exposed and his sisters get exposed to anything, they just come and say, oh, you'll not believe what happened at school today. Such freedom, such light.
Beautiful. And so this is where we were hoping to get to. We talk so much about preparing our children and protecting them and preventing, right? That's where a lot of the resources in this niche revolve around: filters, parental controls, and we want to keep them away. But what we're talking about is homes where there already is pornography, and maybe they have been exposed and there are these problems, and what's the next step? And you've answered for us. Open communication is the key. So we've had a great discussion, and what we really wanted to come around to was practical tips and tools. So what do you have to share with us?
I have a 3-step plan because I like practical steps. So the first one is you need to educate yourself. So before you do anything, before you start to tackle this in your relationship, you need to educate yourself. And so you feel really confident that you know why you're doing this, because it's difficult to open up this conversation in your marriage where it might potentially make waves. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd love to say that all husbands are receptive and go, I'm so glad you asked that, darling. But a lot of the time, they're like, have you been snooping? How dare you? Of course I'm not. Everybody does it. What's your problem? You know, that's more likely what's, going to happen. So you need to be really solid in why you're addressing this, what it's going to do to your marriage, and that the way that you're doing it is actually effective. So this is why we started the podcast. So that all those early questions, is it my fault? Will I ever trust him again? How do we get better? Why is this necessary? Why do we have to do that? All those questions are answered for you, because I really do think in order to stand firm, you do need to be equipped. And that leads me on to my second point, which is get support. You can't do this on your own. You need other women round you so that when your brain goes to crazy places and goes, I can't do this, I'm risking everything, I'll just forget about it and put my head in the sand. You need those women to go, actually, no, you do need to do this. And this is how you do it. And this is the calm, assertive, effective way to do it. I know you want to scream and cry and break things, but that's not going to actually help your cause at all. And you need to see other women who are further down the path than you. You need to hear their stories of hope and learn from their mistakes. And also, it's the whole thing about pornography addiction is that it's an intimacy disorder. Mm-hmm. So both of you need to develop intimacy with support groups. And so if you can do that before you start this conversation, you're already ahead of the game. So I would say, listen to the podcast, join our support group, there are lots of support groups out there, and just get in fellowship with other women who are walking this path, who are not going to give you advice like, just watch it with him, because let's face it, there are many people who that's their approach.
Yes.
Lots. You need like-minded people who are just going to keep you grounded and keep you on the right track. So educate yourself, find support, and then thirdly, draw that firm line in the sand. Draw that boundary. We are not allowing pornography in our household. It's not good for you. It's not good for us. It's not good for me. It's not good for our children. And if you're not able to reach out for help because your brain is not working correctly at the moment, I'm going to do it for you.
Beautiful. And I would add, get the book. Read Fight for Love too.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Okay, and we are going to turn the time over to Marilyn for a quick recap.
Great. Yes, loved the conversation. So just to recap, we first started with Rosie's story and where many wives find themselves, this missing gap of getting all sorts of confusing messages, often from the world that you just participate, or from the church if you're faith-based, that it's not that big a deal, just try to work around it. So to solve that, she talked about setting boundaries, and really important to understand that this is not about fixing the person or controlling the person, but setting boundaries is liberating and empowering for everyone involved. And I loved when Rosie talked about, think about reaching your potential. So whether you're dealing with a spouse or dealing with children, you obviously want your children to reach their full potential, but you also want your marriage to reach its full potential. And so those boundaries are meant to do that. Then we talked about myths in the second half and how it's so common to feel like this is our fault. And but that marital sex and porn serve two entirely separate purposes, and they cannot be used to help the other. I think that's great to understand that. And the other myth that it's not so bad, but we have to cut through the secrets and the lies, and those things as well are liberating. We talked about the indirect impact of porn, and we compared it to secondhand smoke. And was also compared to the quiet killer of families. When it's in the atmosphere, we know whether we're the spouse or whether we're the children. And so we need to deal with it sooner than later. Being transparent in age-appropriate ways gives kids an advantage. We love that you said that, Rosie. And you left us with 3 practical steps to educate ourselves, to get support, and draw a firm line in the sand. So I'm going to turn it back to you. Can you leave our listeners with a challenge today?
If your husband is compulsively using pornography, I challenge you to go and find our podcast, Fight for Love, and listen to a panel of women, of wives who have been there, and they're going to answer all those early questions that you have, and that will empower you and equip you and just give you the confidence to be able to draw that firm line in the sand.
Thank you, Rosie. And we will have all of those links to the podcast and for you to be able to follow Rosie in our podcast notes.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Media Savvy Moms podcast. For detailed show notes and links to any of the resources mentioned today, visit parentsaware.info. To connect with us on social media, find us on Instagram at Media Savvy Moms and on Facebook and Twitter at Parents Aware. We would love to get your feedback. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast. Until next week, let's keep talking.